Hello and welcome to the RotoWire WNBA show where we talk about fantasy basketball. I'm Jason Shebilske alongside Kirien Sprecher. Today we'll run through a 3-round mock draft and explain our thought process behind each pick. We'll also be discussing our staff's WNBA mock draft that happened just this morning, and we'll preview some of this weekend's preseason action, including Caitlin Clark's WNBA debut tonight. Those who would like to follow along with the full mock draft who are visual learners can visit rotowire.com/WNBA to find that. And those looking to use RotoWire's full offering of tools during draft season can visit rotowire.com/try for a free trial. All right, without further ado, let's get to our mock draft. It'll be an 8-team format, and we previously flipped a coin to establish the order. I'll start first with Kirien going after me. So at the 101, I'll be selecting Breanna Stewart. It's a little bit of a choice between Stewart and A'ja Wilson right here, but last year's MVP, you can't go wrong with her.
Yeah, absolutely. And you get a little more three-point production from Stewart. With number 2, pretty obvious, going A'ja Wilson. Like you said, probably could have made a case for her for number 1, so I'll gladly take her number 2.
Yeah, absolutely. It gets a little bit murkier after round 3, but I'll go with Alyssa Thomas for team 3. And she was just a triple-double machine last year. Even with Brianna Jones returning to the court this year, I think that Alyssa Thomas will still have a really, really solid year.
Yeah, and for fantasy purposes, she's considered a forward. She runs a lot of the point guard, and as we'll talk about later in the draft, forward and centers, front court positions are really hard to come by later in the draft. So securing another forward there is a smart move, and she puts up numbers like a guard. So a perfect world. For team 4, the 4th overall pick, I'm gonna have a little mic drop here. I'm gonna be reaching for rookie phenom Caitlin Clark. I'm aware of all of the concerns that people have with her transitioning to the WNBA, but I think that she could revolutionize the sport. I think people talk about having professional competition will make things harder for her, but I also think that the Fever are in perfect position to help her succeed. They got veteran backcourt options. They got a really strong front court. I just see Clark transitioning right away. Just had a long college season, so that might be a little bit of an impact, but she's also riding on a high. So, and I can't let Jason get her. She's my number 1, so I'm taking her with number 4. Might be a little bit of a reach, but I'm excited to have her on team 4.
Yeah, absolutely nothing wrong with drafting Caitlin Clark early. I think the biggest thing is just the opportunity cost of drafting her over some of the other options. But I love the value that she brings, and like you said, she could revolutionize the game, and she could be a really strong pick when we're looking back on this at the end of the year. So for team 5, I will draft Jewell Loyd, guard from the Seattle Storm. The Storm will look a lot different this year. They made a lot of additions and have kind of joined the ranks of the WNBA super teams this year. But Jewell Loyd is still one of the top scorers in the league. She was just dominant from 3-point range last year. And with all the hype that Caitlin Clark is bringing with her long range this year, Jewell Loyd did a lot of that last year. So I'm looking forward to seeing what she can do again this year.
Yeah, absolutely a solid pick. Like you said, they've added Skylar Diggins-Smith. They added NECA from LA. So there's a lot of mouths to feed, and they're on the up and coming after losing Breanna Stewart last year and kind of be in no man's land. And Loyd filled the gap and was leading the league in scoring for a long time. So I really like that pick. I'm going to be transitioning for the 6th team. I'm going back to forward. Napheesa Collier. MVP candidate, like we said, she's playing for Minnesota. She's a forward/center. ESPN leagues, it doesn't really matter because it's just either forward or center. So she's a front court player. She puts up MVP type numbers. She's on a team that's supposed to be really good again. I think that they could compete in the playoffs. Probably a notch below the super teams like the Liberty, the Aces, the Storm. But I think this Lynx can be really good. And unlike Stewart, A'ja Wilson, Jewell Loyd, she's the clear number 1 option on the team. So I like the value here with pick 6, getting the number 1 player on a top 3 or 4 team with Napheesa Collier.
Hmm. And just to clarify, as we reach the end of the tail end of round one, we are using ESPN scoring settings for this draft, which is head-to-head points. It offers 1 point, 1 fantasy point per point, 1 fantasy point per rebound, 1 per assist, 2 per block, 2 per steal, and 1 point for a three-pointer made. So with that, team seven, I'll be drafting Arike Ogunbowale, guard out of Dallas. Um, Getting her near the end of the first round is just tremendous value. I love her here. Not only is she incredibly talented, but outside of the 2022 season, she's only missed 1 game during her career. She missed 6 regular season games in 2022, but I'm not concerned about her availability, which is one of the biggest things as you look at fantasy players.
Yeah, absolutely. That is super key. Comparing it to the NBA, you look at guys like Domantas Sabonis, Mikal Bridges, who just never miss any time, and they're always outperforming their ADP. So I really like that pick. To end the first round, I feel like it would be a bad idea to let her slip into the second round. So I'm going with Sabrina Ionescu, guard from the New York Liberty. One of the most exciting players in the W. Uh, Epic 3-point shooter. You saw that with her in the WNBA 3-point contest last year, competing against Steph Curry in the NBA contest this year and giving him a run for his money. She's elite from downtown. She's a great passer. She puts up good stats. She was a little bit banged up towards the end of last year, which caused some of her stats to go down. She also has to play with Breanna Stewart, Jonquel Jones, Courtney Vandersloot in New York. So there's a lot of mouths to feed. But if the Liberty are going to take that next step and really they were on a threshold with the Aces last year, but probably not really, like the Aces kind of dominated them in the finals. So if they're going to take that next step and really compete for the title this year, Sabrina needs to be a superstar. So I'm pretty content with taking her at the end of round one, with my team 4 or team 8 technically. And then so to pair with her, I'm going Reen Howard, guard out of the Atlanta Dream. She is a point forward. She's considered a guard, so I don't get the forward slot in ESPN, which kind of sucks, but that's okay. She puts up great numbers. I think the Dream can take another step. They took a big step last year after some big offseason acquisitions. I think she's the best player on the team, so similar with my Collier pick in the first round. Like I'm getting the best player that puts up, maybe not the best player, but the person that's going to put up the best stats. On a team that's on the up and coming. So I really, really like pairing Sabrina with Green at the end of round one there.
Yeah, absolutely. And so to go back to team seven, I will be drafting Natasha Howard, forward from Dallas. I get this question in fantasy football a lot. I get the question of, do you like stacking players? And stacking isn't necessarily something that I'll usually try and do. Stacking is drafting multiple players from the same team in hopes that their production will just like kind of snowball when their team has a good game. I don't necessarily target that sort of strategy, but I love the value of having Natasha Howard here. With Satu Sabali out for the first half of the season, there's going to be plenty of work to go around in Dallas. And having a guard forward combo in the first 2 rounds is probably one of my favorite ways to start a draft. So I love the value of getting Howard here.
Yeah, absolutely. Two Dallas players back to back, probably throws up some flags, but those are two established veterans, proven production, so you can't go wrong with that. Uh, I'm going to be pairing Collier with Chelsea Gray, guard out of the Las Vegas Aces. Collier brings that front court, so I have that solidified. So I feel like it's okay to reach for a guard. Gray's another player like Sabrina. She has to share the court with a lot of proven stars, Asia Wilson, Kelsey Plum, Jackie Young. But Gray always seems to get hers. She's a great scorer. She can score whenever she wants, but she's also totally content dishing out 12, 15 assists in a game. She is a team. She's on a team that's going to score close to 100 points every game. So while there's a lot of mouths to feed, they've had this plan of success work for multiple years. So I'm pretty fine with taking her here and expecting quality production week in and week out.
Mm-hmm. And with team five, I'll be drafting Kelsey Plum, guard from Las Vegas as well. going back to back guards here. It's not something that I like to do usually, but you just can't deny Kelsey Plum's production. She has been dominant since she entered the league, and especially over the last few years, she has been a real centerpiece of that Aces team. So I really like the value here.
Solid play, and I feel like it's pretty ideal to have Gray and Plum go back to back. Like they're not similar players at all, but they put up similar production, and they're on superstar teams. So I like them going back to back. It's a nice like aesthetic thing. So to pair with Caitlin Clark, I'm going center Nneka Ogwumike out of Seattle. Formerly, she's played her entire career for the Sparks, and she's making the trip to Seattle to join Jewel Lloyd and Skylar Diggins-Smith, and hopefully another super team there. Like we said, with Diggins-Smith and with Lloyd, those are two guards. So, there's going to be a lot of attention on those guards. And I feel like even if Ogwumike isn't the number one option, she's going to eat up a bunch of boards. Those guards are going to draw attention, and she could flirt with 20 and 10 nightly. She is a little older for like this round. And I've been trying to target like younger players. I feel like in fantasy, you want players that haven't quite reached their peak, and you're hoping that they're going to reach their peak this year, if that makes sense. Where some safe plays are always fine there, but Nneka is a little older than I would have liked for a second round pick, especially pairing with Caitlin Clark. But I feel like that combo of a veteran big and the young superstar phenom point guard is a good mix, and I kind of like that team there.
Yeah, it feels so weird to hear Nneka Ogwumike's name right before Seattle Storm after playing her entire career in Los Angeles, but I love the pick there. Sticking with Ogwumike's new teammate, I'll go with Skylar Diggins-Smith, a guard from Seattle for Team 3 that pairs her with Alyssa Thomas. Even though we've been talking a lot about the new faces in Seattle, Skylar Diggins-Smith, after sitting out all of last year, I think will be back with a vengeance. She was dominant for Phoenix in 2022, averaging 19.7 points, 5.5 assists, and 4 rebounds per game. Really, over the past 5 years, she's been one of the premier players in the WNBA, and I love getting her near the end of round 2.
One thing you didn't mention is kind of how her career with the Mercury ended. I feel like the out for a vengeance is right. That was a weird situation with her and Diana Taurasi. So I love that pick. I think she could explode in her first year back. So to pair with A'ja Wilson, my number 1 overall pick that I took number 2, I'm going with Kahleah Copper. This might be a little bit of a homer pick. Copper is now playing for the Mercury after multiple years with our Chicago Sky. So I have a soft spot in my heart for her. She won a championship with the Sky. She was like the lone superstar remaining on the team last year and was a fantastic scorer, scored almost 20 points per game. Her transition to the Mercury, we're not quite sure what her role is going to be, right? Like she has to share the floor with fellow newcomer Natasha Cloud. Taurasi's still there. Sophia Cunningham, Rebecca Allen are shooters that are going to get shots up. So is there really going to be enough opportunities for Copper to score 20 points again? I'm not sure. But even without her scoring, I feel like she can make an impact. And I feel like if the Mercury are good, she'll be a big reason why. A little bit of a homer pick because I'm a big Sky fan and I like having her on my team. But pairing A'ja Wilson with Kahleah Copper feels like a solid guard center combo for me.
Yeah, absolutely nothing wrong with Copper. Even with all the talent around her in Chicago, she was the Finals MVP when the Sky won it all in 2021. So I love the value, even though it does come with a little bit of risk. You have A'ja Wilson at the top, who is one of the best players in the draft. So you can afford to be a little bit risky there. So for Team 1, back to the first team in the draft, I'm going to draft Aaliyah Boston, center out of Indiana. Caitlin Clark has gotten so much attention in this year's draft, but Aaliyah Boston shouldn't be overlooked. The number 1 pick from last year's draft. She was dominant during her career at South Carolina. She hit the ground running in the WNBA last year. And even with Clark in Indiana now, I think that Aaliyah Boston is still going to be just such a focal point of that team that I'm really excited to get her to pair with Breanna Stewart, especially. So after drafting 2 front court pieces with Team 1 to kick off round 3, I'm going to draft Brittany Sykes. Starting off round 3, there's a lot of guard talent still available. But Washington's in a unique situation this year. Elena Deladon is stepping away from basketball. Natasha Cloud is now in Phoenix. So I think that Brittany Sykes is due for a massive role within Washington's system. And I'm really excited to see what she can do. I love having her as my first guard.
Yeah, I think that's super solid. You have 2 proven front court options, and then you take a guard that has a really high upside coming into this year. Going back to the Aaliyah Boston pick, she's one of the reasons why I'm so high on Caitlin Clark. You can see the pick and rolls just working to perfection. If they try to hedge or double or trap Clark, she's just going to drop it off to Boston, and Boston's going to have a little small guard rotating over in the paint, and she's just going to go to work. Absolutely love that pick. And just to round out Team 1, that leaves you with Breanna Stewart, Aaliyah Boston, and Brittany Sykes. Solid work there. So moving on to the Team 2, well, this will be my final pick of this 3-round mock draft. So I started with Asia Wilson, and then I went Kalia Copper, and then I'm ending it with Jonquel Jones. It took she's a forward, a front court option for the New York Liberty. She joined the Liberty last year after being in Connecticut with their trio of front court options and that dominated for a long time. She went to New York. It took her a little while to find a rhythm with the new team, but she was integral to their run in the postseason. She was putting up double-doubles, scoring, grabbing boards, playing great defense. I expect her to pick that up to begin 2024, be a solid double-double threat, and I feel like that's great value at the top of the 3rd round, a player that can put up 15 and 12 on a nightly basis.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the combo of Wilson, Copper, and Jones for Team 2. I think that that'll be a really strong team with 2 forwards is usually my my preferred start to the first 3 rounds of the draft. So I really like that. With Team 3, I'll be drafting Jackie Yun, a guard from Las Vegas. It just speaks to the depth of talent that the Aces have, that Jackie Yun is going in the third round, and she is kind of the 4th option in Las Vegas. That doesn't mean that she should be overlooked by any means. Wilson and Gray and Plum are dominant, but so is Jackie Yun. And that leaves Team 3 with Alyssa Thomas, Skylar Diggins-Smith, and Jackie Yun. Even though it's 2 guards on there, it's 2 really strong guards, and I like the flexibility that gives me in the middle rounds with Team 3.
Yeah, absolutely. Jackie Young going against the 4th best defender every game is barbecue chicken, as Shaq would like to say. I feel like that's a very solid and safe pick there. So for Team 4, I'm going to be rounding out my Caitlin Clark, Nneka Ogwumike with a little bit of Brittany Griner. I feel like, I had to reach for Clark. I had to. I wanted to. It was in my soul. I could not let her slip. So I reached for Clark, but then I get lucky with 2 veteran centers that have a consistent and history of putting up super solid production. Griner, she only played like 27 minutes per game last year as her first like WNBA action after, being detained in Russia. So it was to be expected that her role would be a little bit limited and whatnot. I expect with a full off season of training and getting herself back into shape to be closer to that 30-point or that 30-minute threshold again, which should really afford solid, consistent production. You mentioned that blocks are worth 2 points in this. I expect her to rack up blocks like crazy, and she's a double-double threat. We also are kind of seeing a turning of the tide in Phoenix, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But I feel like Brittany Griner is still a key part of that team, and I'm really content taking her with the 3rd pick. And I feel like I got 2 really safe picks in Nneka and Brittany after reaching for Clark, and I'm really happy with how that worked out.
Yeah, I love the Griner pick. You said that she mentioned that she averaged 27 minutes per game last year. And I'm really excited to see just how much that can grow this year, not only for her personally, but for her on court production. I think that the sky's the limit for her this year, even with the surrounding talent around her. I think that she'll have a really solid year. Going back to Team Five, I had no choice. I have to select Alicia Gray, guard from the Dream here. I've preached in the WNBA draft cheat sheet. I've preached on this podcast how much I like to leave round the first 3 rounds with at least one front court piece. But Team Five now has 3 guards in Jewel Lloyd, Kelsey Plum, and Alicia Gray. This is just an example where sometimes you have to take what falls to you. Value of each of these 3 guards. It means that if we continue drafting, I would have to really specifically target forwards and centers in the next few rounds. But it really sets up my starting lineup to be in a really good spot.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, with my first overall pick, or I guess she was a second round pick, Ryan Howard, the Dream are great. I think they're on the up and coming, and Alicia Gray is a big reason why. With 3 guards, you can probably turn your attention to looking at some of the rookie forwards, Cardoso, Reese. There's a lot of solid young front court options out there that we don't really know what's going to happen. So you might have to reach for one of those players. But there's always the waiver wire to work around too. I like you said, she fell to you and had to take her, but there's a lot of work to be done there throughout the season and on the waiver wire. All right, so with Collier and Chelsea Gray, I'm going to round out that team with drafting Breanna Bonner. Sticking with this consistent front court production in rounds 2 and 3. Bonner played 37 of 40 games last year. She's getting up there in age, but her defensive production isn't going down. And I think an encouraging sign, even as she gets older, she averaged a career high 1.3 made threes per game last year. So, as you get older, you're kind of expanding your range. That could allow her to play longer, not have to body down low with these young forwards that are coming in and going to be like trying to make a mark. She's just going to stand out there, play her game, be a veteran, and be super solid. And this is probably one of my highest floor teams of this little 8-team draft we're doing here with Collier, Chelsea Gray, and Breanna Bonner. I feel like that just has a super, super high floor. Barring injury or anything, if they're playing, I'm going to get super solid production and I can stack up wins against teams that, maybe are reached for a couple players that they want to have unexpected production. I feel like I have a super consistent production with these 3.
Yeah, that team is off to a really solid start. I like the first 3 rounds of that team. With my final pick in this mock draft, Team 7, which started off with Arike Ogunbowale and Natasha Howard, a guard and a forward, I'm going to draft another front court piece out of Los Angeles, Cameron Brink. So forward from the Sparks. She's a rookie this year, and I tend to shy away from rookies within the first few rounds. But if there's a player who has a ton of upside out of this year's rookie class, it's Cameron Brink, along with Caitlin Clark. But Cameron Brink averaged 3.5 blocks per game during her final year at Stanford. Her foul trouble became sort of an issue toward the end of her collegiate career. But if she can stay on the court this year, there's a ton of work to go around now that Nneka Onwuemuke is in Seattle. So I really like Brink's potential as a rookie.
Yeah, absolutely. Super high floor or super high ceiling there. Pretty low floor given the foul trouble and whatnot. In fantasy, I feel like it's super important to target teams that may be rebuilding and have a lot of minutes to allot those rookies. And LA is certainly in that position. So I think Brink has plenty of upside going into a rookie season. All right, to end the 3-round mock draft and to round out Team 8 that started with Sabrina Ionescu and Reen Howard, I'm going with another maybe a little homer pick, Marina Marbury out of the Chicago Sky. This is my youngster squad, right? 3 young players that are on the up and up, and I feel like their teams need them to take big leaps forward, right? They're all oozing with talent, and they've shown that they can produce at this level, but maybe not produce at an elite level every night. And if they do take that step, this team could be super dangerous. So unlike the team 6 that I had with all my veterans and a super high floor, I feel like this is my high ceiling team. The floor might be a little bit lower, but if everything goes right, this team could be super dangerous. With Copper out of the picture, Marbury could average 20 points a game. That might be a little bit of a reach, but I don't see why it couldn't happen with how like little offensive options the Chicago Sky have this year.
Oh yeah, and that team has three guards in Ionescu, Howard, and Mabry, but all three of them have the chance to really be centerpieces for their team, especially Mabry. The Sky looks so much different this year, and I'm really excited to see how Mabry is able to step up under Teresa Weatherspoon.
Yeah, and like you said, three guards. If I could, I would have a little of a conversation with the people at ESPN and be like, all right, come on. Howard is a little bit of a point forward. Marbury is a little bit of a small forward. Maybe I could get some flexibility there, but no, just kidding. It's like you said, three guards. I'm going to have with dissimilar with what the team that you had with three guards. Going to have to reach probably for like an Angel Reese or a Camila Cardozo or something for the front court. But I really like the upside of that team, and that normally happens when you draft three guards is you like the upside, and then you're like, oh no, I have enough forwards.
Yeah,
good, but
absolutely.
I'm pretty content with how that rounded out, and it'd be interesting to see what happened with those two teams if we went further into this mock.
Mm-hmm. All right, so moving on, the RotoWire experts did a full fantasy mock draft this morning. Kirien, can you say how your team wound up over the first few rounds, and how do you like your starting lineup for that team?
Yeah, so surprise, surprise. I reached for Caitlin Clark with the number 3 pick of this one. Probably, Alyssa Thomas is super safe. Collier is super safe, but Caitlin Clark's my girl. I had to take her. And then I rounded out the first 3 rounds with Caitlin Clark, Reen Howard, and Brittany Griner. So pretty similar to what we were talking about here. I like all 3 of those players. I have 2 young players with a really high upside. And then I have Griner, who I feel like, is a veteran, but she can also take a step forward compared to her stats last year. So I feel like I got really good value there. As the draft went on, I was like, I don't really have much front court depth behind Griner. I reached for Angel Reese, and I'm hesitant to see where she can go. Again, Chicago Sky fan here, so maybe a little bit of bias in that pick. But we were talking about that video out of training camp last week where Reese seemed to be in the starting lineup. So if she's a starter and I could get her in round, I think it was like 6, and she can be close to, I think even if Angel Reese's offensive game isn't as great as it could be right away, I think she's going to be a super solid rebounder. So I'm going to have probably some work to do on the waiver wire in that league because of my lack of front court depth. But the top 3 picks of Clark, Howard, and Griner, I feel like they can carry me to the promised land.
Mm-hmm. For me, this draft is all about adapting. Especially after the Clark pick at number 3 overall, things kind of went off the rails, so to say. So I wound up with Arika Gumbawale, guard from the Wings, Sabrina Ionescu, guard from the Liberty, and Kalia Copper, guard from the Mercury, as my first 3 picks. That means that my entire starting lineup of guards is set. You have 2 guards and 1 utility spot within a standard ESPN lineup, and you have 3 forward center spots. So I knew that I needed to target front court pieces in the next few rounds. So I started off round 4 with Nalissa Smith, forward from the Fever. We talked about Aaliyah Boston earlier, but Nalissa Smith was the number 2 pick in 2022. And she has just so much talent. She showed improvement in her second year in the league. And now that she doesn't have to shoulder quite as much of the load, I think that the Fever are getting ready to turn a corner, and it's really exciting to see after a few years of struggles. But I think Nalissa Smith will be really important for that team. In round 5, I went with probably one of the highest risk, highest reward players that I view in this draft, and that's Tina Charles, center from the Dream. She took 2023 off. She had a rocky end to her tenure in Phoenix in 2022 before joining Seattle to close out that year. But I really love the value of getting Tina Charles here now that she's in Atlanta. She's being coached by one of her former teammates in Tanisha Wright. And if she can have a prominent role, even at age 35, I think that she is one of the biggest upside plays in the middle rounds of the draft. And
Yeah,
then,
totally agree with Tina with that. Veteran. You know that she can produce at this level. But like super high risk, high reward play.
yeah, absolutely. And then another sleeper that I really like, I was able to get in round 6, and that's Shakira Austin, center from the Mystics. With no Elena Deladon in Washington this year, Shakira Austin underwent hip surgery in December, but I'm still really excited to see the role that she can have in Washington's front court. And I wound up shoring up my front court depth with Alana Smith and Kalani Brown in the next 2 rounds. Um, Especially with Tina Charles being a somewhat risky pick, I like having the depth there, and it gives me a lot of flexibility for as the season progresses.
For sure, for sure. So just to break it down, my team in this mock draft went Caitlin Clark, Ryan Howard, Brittany Griner, Courtney Williams, Jordan Canada, Dorka Uhash, Angel Reese, Rebecca Allen, Sammy Whitcomb. Not a lot of front court depth, but I feel like I got good value late in the draft. And I feel like I can probably flip a couple of those guards if any injuries happen in a trade to get some more front court depth. I think Dorka and Angel as starters is a risky play. And I'm definitely going to be looking to upgrade those positions. But I also feel like they're 2 really young players that can take a big leap forward. Dorka, didn't get consistent playing time as a rookie last year, but when she did get playing time, her numbers looked really solid. So I'm hoping that she's a starter and playing close to 30 minutes. And I feel like the same with Reese. If she's in the starting lineup, she'll be super solid.
Yeah, absolutely. And my team wound up with Ogunbowale, Ionescu, Copper, Nalissa Smith, Tina Charles, Shakira Austin, Alana Smith, Kalani Brown, and Crystal Dangerfield. I think that there are a lot of high upside players on that team, and I was able to get a lot of my sleepers that I like. So I'm really excited to see how this team pans out. Kind of putting you on the spot, do you have a team other than your own that you like the best? And again, all of the full results of the mock draft can be found at rotowire.com/WNBA.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm taking a peek right now. I feel like I like my team a lot. I like your team. If I had to like go out on a limb, I'd probably go with our guy Mitchell Hansen, Jewel Lloyd out of Seattle, Chelsea Gray out of Las Vegas. Reached a little bit for Cameron Brink, but then like went back down to earth with some super solid plays and Cheyenne Parker, Kayla McBride, Laney from New York, Isabel Harrison, Shug Sutton, Azura Stevens. So I feel like Brink was really like the only real reach here. And then there's just like super solid options at a lot of positions. So Jewel Lloyd, Chelsea Gray to lead the way, and then like whatever Brink is what his team is going to be. So if Brink has a solid season, and we've talked about the avenues and the paths are there for her to have that solid season, I think his team could be really solid.
Yeah, absolutely. I really liked Juan Pablo Aravena's team. He started off number 2 pick, Asia Wilson. It's not really a surprise, but he also added another solid front court piece in Aaliyah Boston to close out round 2. And then he went guards for the next 4 picks. He went Skylar Diggins Smith, Diana Taurasi, Kelsey Mitchell, and Lexi Brown. Diggins Smith and Kelsey Mitchell, they are sort of being undervalued this year, even though we've been talking about them a lot. They have a lot of talent around them that they are being overlooked a little bit. And I think that if they can maintain some semblance of production this year, those will be really solid picks. Tarasi has struggled with injuries over the past few years, but she's one of the greatest to play the sport. I'm not too concerned about her. And Lexi Brown, there's just so much talent in. There's just so much opportunity in Los Angeles now that they're in rebuilding mode that I think Lexi Brown is due for a big season. He drafted Satu Sabali with his next pick in round 7. I probably would have waited until at least round 8 to do that. But he got Carly Samuelson in the next round to round out his starting lineup, and Shatori Walker Kimbrough to Walker Kimbrough to round out his roster in round 9. I think that overall it's a really solid team, especially if he's active on the waiver wire. I think that this team has a lot of potential, especially stemming from his first few rounds.
Yeah, and Tarasi and Sabali are my real two concerns with that team. And they could easily turn into the best picks of of his draft. But hesitantly, Sabali has had injury concerns throughout her career. Even if he can stash her on the IR and she comes back late in the season, she might not be playing like a full allotment of minutes. She might be rusty. I think there's a lot of risk with that pick. Especially like you said, if you would have waited for a round or two, that would be a little bit easier to, stomach that loss. And Tarasi, like, no disrespect to the GOAT. She's fantastic. But the inefficiency concerns, I know obviously you don't get any negative points for poor field goal percentage or whatever in ESPN leagues. But if this team is trying to turn a corner, she might have to settle into a little more of a secondary role. So those are my two big concerns. But overall, super solid. That top 3 is super dangerous and can lead Juan's team as far as the championship.
Yeah. Sabali's injury news has been one of the just most devastating reports of the offseason. She's going to miss the first half of the season. They expect her to be out through the Olympic break. Health has been one of the biggest concerns for her, but when she's on the court, she's been dominant. So if she is able to return at full force after the Olympics, I think JP's team down the stretch has really solid potential. All right, and closing things off, we have preseason action beginning tonight. We have the Fever against the Wings, and we have the Sky against the Lynx. Kirien, out of those 2 games, what are you most looking forward to seeing tonight?
Well, if anybody has made it this far, I don't think it's much of a surprise that I'm looking forward to watching Caitlin Clark tonight. Obviously, I drafted her in the 4th round in our little 3-round mock draft, in 4th overall pick, and I drafted her in the 3rd overall pick in our expert leagues. So obviously, super excited to see her. I saw something on Twitter today that Fever floor seats were going for like $8,000. I don't know if that was for this game or for like the regular season, but that's still crazy. If anyone wants to give me $8,000 to go watch Caitlin Clark floor seats, that would be fantastic. Much appreciated. Obviously, everyone's going to be looking forward to watching Caitlin Clark, but we also got a couple of the rookies for the Sky playing in the other game, Camila Cardozo and Angel Reese. I'm really interested to see how the starting lineup looks. I'm assuming that they'll get a bunch of run because they're young, and they need to get that WNBA experience, but they're also coming off a super long college season. So it'll be interesting to see how Cardozo and Reese are deployed, and also would be super impactful on fantasy rankings to see if one of them is starting and one of them isn't. So be sure to tune into that game too.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of WNBA storytellers are probably looking forward most to that Indiana part of it. I agree. WNBA stat heads, kind of such as myself, I'm looking forward to seeing what Dallas's rotation looks like. We probably won't get a fully accurate picture of the regular season playing time just because minutes will probably be limited. There are a few absences that we're dealing with on all 4 teams playing tonight. But I'm really looking forward to seeing how the workload is distributed with Satu Sabali out. There's a lot of talent that's still there. There's Crystal Dangerfield. There's JC Sheldon, who's a rookie. There's Natasha Howard. There's Tiara McCowan, Kalani Brown. All of them have so much potential that they've displayed in the past. But I think really the biggest thing heading into this year will be which one can have the sustained playing time to get a really fantasy relevant role. I think it'll be at least one of them, and we'll get our first look in on that tonight.
For sure. Super excited for the season to get underway.
Yeah, exciting times. Draft season is fully upon us. And that does it for our premiere episode of the RotoWire WNBA show. Thanks so much to all who have supported the WNBA along the way. Thanks to everyone who has supported RotoWire's coverage of the WNBA. The show has been a long time coming. We'll come at you twice a week, Mondays and Fridays at 1 o'clock Central. That means that next week we'll be starting off the week with a 1 o'clock show. We'll talk about top 12 rankings. So we'll do a really deep dive into some of the top options available. And then on Friday, we'll really get into more draft stuff, sleepers, breakout contenders, and bust potential. So looking forward to seeing you, and thanks for watching. We'll see you later.